Joel Richardson continues giving us these insights. Thus we see that the Mahdi is the leader of a world revolution that will institute a, quote, new world order, end quote, that will be based on the religion of Islam. Thus, in the Islamic model, the Mahdi is a political figure. Yes. He has military might behind him. Yes. But one of his chief titles is 12th Imam, and in Islam, Imam is a religious figure, almost like rabbinic, or like Judaism's rabbis, or like Christianity's popes, or clerics, or preachers, pastors, these types of religious figures that we have in Christianity. Let's keep reading Joel Richardson. Islam will be the only religion that will be allowed to be practiced. We've got to contend with this possible and probable fact. Otherwise, Islam is not going to stop attempting. They're not going to stop trying. It's highly unlikely. You ready for this? It is highly unlikely that Islam will simply lay down their arms, surrender their position as a dominant religion, and say, we've decided to just accept Christianity as a sister religion, sister Abrahamic religion, along with Judaism, and we're going to live peaceably with one another. Now, I think your lower level Muslims would probably agree to that aspect, but the higher up you get into this scheme of eschatology in Islamic circles, the more and more it's going to be, nope, there's only going to be one true religion. We're not going to allow the other religions. So it's highly unlikely that devout Muslims would ever say, let's convert to Christianity or allow Christianity to coexist with us and share our resources. Even now in Israel, on the Temple Mount, and this bears relevance to our discussion, so it's not a rabbit trail that I'm chasing here. It's not a side rabbi. Even now in Israel, on the Temple Mount, the holiest structure on top of that Temple Mount is not a Jewish structure like it used to be in the past, right? Solomon's temple used to be up there, and Herod's temple used to be up there. And so now what's up there? An Islamic shrine, right? Two of them, actually, I think. The Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. Both of those are up on the Temple Mount right now. Ask them if they will kindly share that Temple Mount area with Judaism, allow Judaism to build a temple. Nope, ain't going to happen. Ask them if they'll allow a church, a good old-fashioned Baptist church to be built up there. Nope, ain't going to happen. How about a Catholic cathedral? Can we build that on top there? Nope. What's my point? The point is, even now, at this stage, the control of the Temple Mount is being dominated and is locked up by Arabic/Muslim controlled powers. They're not letting any other religions up there. I mean, if you're a Jewish person or an Israeli living in Israel today, and you try and go up there and do any religious type of activity, right? You're going to run into trouble. You're just begging to start World War III. So how much more will it be in that day when, remember, all of this is going to be controlled by Satan. God is watching, and God is ultimately controlled. So don't lose sight of that. But to the degree that God will be allowing Satan to have this final rebellious move among mankind, so that it comes to a head, so that Jesus can finally put all of those enemies, and then ultimately death one day, but put those religious enemies under his feet. Remember, Satan is going to put himself in the temple. He's going to establish himself in the temple, take his seat, using Paul's words, in the temple, and declare himself to be God. Do you think he's going to be allowing other religious worship and devotion to other gods and other religious figures at that point in time? No. By the midpoint of the week, he is going to demand worldwide worship of himself. And that is a scary parallel to what we're reading here about the Mahdi and what he's going to try to be setting up with his cabinet there. Let's keep reading. Both the Antichrist and the Mahdi are said to be the unqualified leaders of a global religious movement that will draw worship away from the God of the Bible and his son Jesus Christ. That's the component that should be alarming to us as Christians, as we see the rise of not just the one world government by the Antichrist, but the rise of Islam alongside of that, and the very, again, real probability that Islam's Mahdi is going to be the one that Satan utilizes in Satan's last one world government. Here's where you need to catch the difference, and I'll shut up after this and just keep reading for the last 10 minutes of our show. Is there going to be a one world government? Absolutely. Is there going to be a one world Islamic religion? Possibly. Possibly. So the difference between those two statements that I just made is the Bible prophesies that there definitely will be a final one world religious system established in place, along with a one world political movement, one world kind of controlled military, one world monetary system, one world banking system, right? Controlled by a mark that is implemented in the hand and the forehead, or both, or the number of the name that's put on you, or something like that. Worldwide mandated worship of the image or images. The Greek can go either way. It's one giant image that's established somewhere in the world that has cameras on it that are streamed 24/7 around the world, all the time, or multiple miniature images that you can buy that are demonically infused, right? They have demon powers in them. They're indwelt by demons, and they're mandated to be purchased by every person in the world. And that way you have demonic worship, that way satanic worship, one way or another. The Bible describes these activities with certainty, and it will happen. It's not a probability. It's not a plausibility. It's absolute certainty. The Islamic component that we're describing in these studies is simply a possibility / plausibility that is added to the very disturbing reality of what will take place. So don't think to yourself, well, this guy Ariel, this Bible teacher, this Torah teacher, he's talking about this Islamic model Antichrist. I don't believe in that. I don't subscribe to that. I don't think that's a possibility. That might not happen, right? Since when has Islam ever been right? This Mahdi that they're supposedly going to rise, and the Muslim Jesus and all that stuff. All that's a fabrication. Islam's not right? Their religion's false. Why should I even care about all of that? That's not going to happen, right? I don't have to be worried about that. Well, you're misunderstanding what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that Islam is definitely going to rise to power and be the one world government. I'm not saying that the Mahdi is definitely going to come into power. I'm not saying that the Dajjal is definitely going to hit the scene, blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying those things. What I'm saying is that's a strong possibility / probability. What I am saying, however, is that the one world government ruled by Satan and the Antichrist and the false prophet, that will happen. Right? Okay, that's why is it going to happen? Not because Ariel says it's going to happen. It's going to happen because the Bible says it's going to happen, right? The revelation of Jesus Christ to the Apostle John and on the Isle of Patmos, he recorded those words. They are scripture. It will happen. Let's keep reading Joel. For these last 10 minutes, I'll try and read somewhat interrupted, and we'll finish out our study this way. Joel says, we're not going to finish Joel's notes. I'm just going to try and stop interrupting you guys, okay? Joel says, as we will see clearly in later chapters of his book, inherent in the worship of Allah within the context of Islam is a direct denial of the God of the Bible and his son, Jesus Christ. And we just read that a similar sentence that a moment ago. Joel says, in fact, this is the reason that some Muslims feel so strongly as to say that the Mahdi will, quote, eradicate those pigs and dogs, i.e. the Christians and the Jews, they're the pigs and the dogs, who refuse to convert to Islam. Kind of scary, huh? Yeah. Which leads us, Joel says, to the next obvious similarity between the Antichrist and the Mahdi. Are you ready? Here we go. This next paragraph is entitled, here we go, The Antichrist's Targeted Campaign Against Jews and Christians, who the previous Islamic specialist called the pigs and the dogs. All right, this ought to be a somewhat disturbing paragraph in Joel's book for Jews and Christians for obvious reasons. And for actually, I might add, as I interject, I said I wouldn't interrupt, but let me interject this part. Again, as far as I can tell, what we might call your garden variety Muslim today, your average Muslim, no matter which country he resides in, your garden variety Muslim has an amicable relationship with Jews and Christians. Right? They're likely his neighbors. They're his co-workers. Right? They're the people that he buys his groceries from. He doesn't have any qualm with them. He doesn't have any beef with them. He's not trying to implement jihad and get rid of the pigs and the dogs. But we're talking about an Islamic eschatology that factors in very high-level religious and political figures, Mahdi, Islamic Isa, Dajjal, these type of figures that at that level, when you start going high up into Islamic eschatology, and in order for you to bring in a one-world Islamic religion, you have to get rid of the scum. You have to get rid of the opposition. You have to eliminate those who are going to oppose your political and religious agenda. Right? It's not enough to have some kind of a bipartisan, to use political terminology. It's not enough to have some agreement with your opponents. You've got to, like the Palestinians speak of Israel, you've got to push them into the Mediterranean Sea. You got to expunge the land of them. So let's keep reading Joel and look at this. The Bible is very clear that Satan, through the Antichrist, will specifically target first Jews, Revelation chapter 12, and then Christians for death. In the book of Revelation, chapter 12, like I just mentioned, and 13, we read another prophetic passage of scripture that is rich with symbolic language. A lot of the book of Revelation is symbolic, but thankfully, most of the book of Revelation actually self-interprets itself. It talks in what seems to be riddles and what we might call spiritualities or characteristic language or apocalyptic language or something to that effect, but usually it defines itself symbolic language, etc., etc. Joel says, initially, speaking of these chapters, it's slightly difficult to understand, but after the symbols are explained, it becomes very clear. So he said the same thing that I just mentioned. So let's read this quote from the book of Revelation, chapter 12, right here on the screen. A great and wondrous sign appeared in heaven. This is Revelation chapter 12. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. All right, so Joel's going to provide an interpretation that's fairly well received across Christian circles, so I don't have to make any big differentiation here about with what he's going to say. The woman, symbolically pictured here, this is Joel's interpretation, is the family or nation of Israel, the Jewish people. We see, he says, that she is crowned with 12 stars. This represents the 12 sons of Israel who became the 12 tribes that make up the family or the nation of Israel per Genesis 35, 23 through 26. And now we have another quote from the book of Revelation. Keep continuing. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his heads. We're going to find that phrase again referring to the Antichrist, slightly reworded, but it's basically the same description, which tells us the association between Satan and the Antichrist in the last days. John continues in the book of Revelation, the dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that he might devour her child the moment it was born. And then John continues, she gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. And her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. Revelation 12, 2 through 5. And of course, we're talking about Israel and Yeshua, right, the Christ Messiah. Let's read Joel's interpretation, and then we're drawing our study to a close. I'll keep reading as much as I can for the last 2 or 3 minutes. Joel says, he interprets, the woman, Israel, becomes pregnant and gives birth to a man-child who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. This is a clear reference, of course, to Jesus, the Jewish Messiah, and we can reference Psalm 2, verse 9. The dragon mentioned here is identified in verse 9 as, quote, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world, keep reading, astray, end quote. So we don't have to guess. Again, many of the symbols are self-interpreted in the book of Revelation if you just let it speak for itself. Joel continues, we see that Satan desires to kill Jesus, but instead Jesus is, quote, snatched up to God and to his throne, end quote. And then that also reminds us of the fact that Jesus is going to be given the throne of dominion, and that goes all the way back to the book of Daniel, Daniel's vision in chapter 7 of Daniel. This is a reference to Jesus' ascension to heaven, Joel reminds us, after the resurrection that we read about in Acts 1:8. After this, then we have another quote from the book of Revelation. He's finishing out chapter 12 here, essentially reading all of Revelation chapter 12. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth and his angels with him. And then he jumps forward a little bit in the narrative from the Bible. He, the dragon, pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman was given the two wings of a great eagle. Scrolling down here, given the two wings of a great eagle so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the desert, where she would be taken care of. For how long? For a time, times, and half a time, which is 3.5 years, by the way, 12 months. 42 months, 1,260 days, 42 months, 3.5 years. So time, times, and half a time. She's hidden out of the serpent's reach. Then John in the book of Revelation says, the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to make war against the rest of her offspring. And then the definition of who those are is those who obey God's commandments and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And that's our quote from Revelation chapter 12, verses 1, 6, 9, 13, 14, and 17. Essentially, we read the entire chapter of Revelation chapter 12. So, what we're learning as we conclude tonight is that there are these parallels. This is what a summary of what we learned tonight's study. There are these parallels between the Antichrist himself in the Bible and the Mahdi of Islamic eschatology. And the important parallels are drawn so that we as Christians can be better prepared for the very strong possibility / probability that when Islam's preeminence rises in the last day, there could be a very strong possibility that Satan decides to utilize Islam as one of his religious components to his final world empire, his eighth beast empire. It's got to be somebody, right? It could be Christianity, it could be Judaism, but because of the very detailed parallel within Islamic eschatology, it's almost like Islam is almost tailor-made the one world religious component for Satan. In fact, it's already been put in place. But that would be scary if that were the case. But the even scarier fact, and I'll close with that, is it actually didn't work in that order. It's rather that Islam was already established by Satan from the very beginning and has really been being groomed down through the centuries to become this final tool in the hands of Satan. That's really what's going on. It's not so much that Satan is usurping a religion that was established by someone who was bringing truth. We actually know from the very beginning that the encounter that Muhammad had in the cave with this angel wasn't actually an angel sent from God. When we look at the fruit of the words that were recorded, and when we look at the fruit of the religion that was born out of that experience and encounter in the cave, we have to, as Christians, come to the very sad conclusion and very alarming conclusion that Muhammad had an encounter with the demon, not with an angel. And so thus, Satan's really been in control all along for that particular aspect. It's a sad truth, and it just means that we as Christians have an open, what we might call mission field to Muslims and those who practice that particular religion. So we'll close with that tonight, and we'll pick this up next week. But that'll do it for Eschatology, a biblical study of end time events.